So as I was talking about, if we focus on customers, that's not bad. It's not a bad thing, because what we want to do is be able to provide goods and services in a way that will be beneficial to them. The problem comes when we start putting agencies in competition with each other. Um, that's to say, like, as we shape incentives for organizations to compete against each other, there's some fundamental questions about, like, whether or not you want the highest performing agencies to receive more resources. What if you have a really small agency that performs a very small function? We keep sending them resources because they're doing a good job. Well, at some point they're out of capacity. They can't do their job any better. And even if they start to grow, they'll grow outside of the mission of the organization. And what about the agencies that aren't performing super well? Maybe you need more resources so that you can perform better. So that's a significant problem. There is a big push in local and state government, even at the federal level too, to do customer service. That's to ask about citizen engagement with what's going on inside these organizations. Now, if you look at the literature, I just happen to know a bit about this, but the literature says that it increases trust in government, but maybe the feedback that we're getting from customers, our clients, the citizens, is not going to be of good value. To say, for example, when we get a customer service evaluation from someone like Immigration and Naturalization Services or the prison system, it doesn't make a lot of sense to ask the people who are in prison how well their service was. Or like a judge, how well do you think that judge ruled on your case? Like, sometimes the citizens are not the people you want to get information from because they're biased. They may not have a good sense of what the what the agency is supposed to do. And they may have, some significant mental capacity problems, or it might just be the wrong place to ask. I think about students. We ask students about how well we serve you. Well, we're the subject matter experts. We know everything about how to do this, but if we don't present a lecture in a way, if we push you in a different thing, like, your satisfaction with us is going to go down, but it might actually be beneficial for you to go through those struggles. So, re-engineering starts at the top. It starts with a new leader coming in and saying, what we're doing is not working. We're going to reorganize. And they maybe change the way that the incentives works inside the system. That new leader pushes down from the top, this new vision. They get rid of all the old processes. They set agencies at competition for resources. They want to fix the process. But obviously the agency is not doing its job very well. Let's fix the process. And it's going to happen every time there's a new leader. So just talking about Cal State system, we had an old president was just doing fine, not great. We get a new president. The new president comes in with new ideas. Well, that new president also changed the funding formula for how many classes we could staff and what was important. So we sent more resources to student services and less to faculty research. Not a problem. But what it did was that meant that the faculty research grants became much more and more competitive, so there were fewer winners. And then it also meant that we were fighting for students in majors. So as we were fighting for students in majors, you hear like the history department yelling at the English department about which student should take which classes. And there's these fights because those fights were real. They were talking about real dollars coming to those organizations. And, we were measuring success by having a number of majors. Well, maybe it's not great to have 20,000 majors in English. Maybe it would be better if you had 8,000 majors here and 2,000 majors there. So reengineering essentially crafts incentives to work like a market, borrows from the private sector with new leaders, forcing ideas and changing the process inside organizations. Now, reengineering can be a really great feat. It upsets the status quo. Lots of things change inside your organization. But as reengineers think about ways that they're going to fix the problem, they get focused on the exact thing that they need to do. That's to say, like, they may be blind to all sorts of other things that are going on that may not be reality for them in their life, but may be reality for the organization. It can be a great virtue to be single-mindedly focused on fixing the organization, but you might be blind to other stuff that's important. President Clinton and Vice President Gore tried to reinvent government. Largely what they did was downsizing, but they wanted to fix the way that we deliver services. And some of the things that we do are like literally gutting old systems and replacing them with new stuff. That's great. A lot of people are afraid of doing a reengineering feat because it can be very high risk. Because we wipe out the old system, there's nothing to fall back on if we have to correct or make a course correction. So we fall into this trap of maybe over-promising success, over-promising improvement, but under-delivery. That's to say, we're not doing it as well as we could. Some people, for example, have argued that we need to scrap the VA. The VA provides health and other services to veterans. Some people say, well, we just get rid of it because it's inefficient or it's doing whatever. And some re-engineers have said, well, let's just scrap all the hospitals and replace that with a voucher system. Okay, well, if we scrapped all the hospitals, we sold them all off, we fired all the VA doctors, and it doesn't work, and maybe other doctors don't accept the vouchers because it's not enough reimbursement, or the veterans start having problems, now we've lost all of our hospitals and all our doctors, it's hard to recover from that. That would be an example of re-engineering where we might risk everything to try something new. And if we're single-mindedly focused on that, it could really upset our system. The last way we can think about fixing organizational reform is continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is the idea that we start making changes slowly, starting with the people who know the most. And generally the people who know the most about an organization are the lowest level employees. They are affected by all the policies. They interact with the customers, the clients, the citizens. They know exactly what works and what doesn't work, where there are flaws in the process. So what we want to do in continuous improvement is get those people to give us information about how to change our organization, how to change our leadership, how to change their policies and programs to better serve people. This is also known as total quality management. In other words, we're trying to fix the process slowly and ensure total quality throughout the whole system. So some of the other ideas are like we can improve efficiency as we start listening to make small tweaks. And as we improve efficiency, our quality goes up. And our costs go down because we start finding all the inefficient problematic processes, the pain points, and re-engineering believes in process that we got to change the process, but it focuses on one leader at the top pushing their vision of the system down, whereas TQM or continuous improvement also focuses on product, the thing that we're doing, improvement. Organization, leadership, and commitment, it just does it from the bottom up. So whereas like a new leader would come in on re-engineering and force this on, continuous improvement says, let's make the organizational change from within, from the bottom up. The idea is to be more responsive as an organization, to make changes based on the things that we find as problematic. The lowest level employees are a part of that process. They start filtering ideas from the bottom to change the structures at the top, to reorganize, to identify problems. Now here's a significant difference between re-engineering and continuous improvement. In re-engineering, you put agencies to fight together like they're in a market. In continuous improvement, what we want to do is encourage cooperation. We want to say, have this boss be really helpful to their staff, and have the staff feel comfortable telling the boss where there are problems. Have the staff feel comfortable talking to the boss about how they could improve their leadership style. Now what that does is it makes the boss check their ego. It sort of strikes at this like hierarchical, I know best, you must do this thing, and tries to engender a process where they can communicate and they can cooperate, all for the good of that organization. You got to establish good interpersonal relationships. You got to set up policies that allow people to provide feedback without reprisal, without someone punishing them for telling something that's going wrong. And one of the biggest other things that's going on with continuous improvement compared to either downsizing or re-engineering is that we want to set up a system where the organization is constantly changing. We're constantly improving. Whereas re-engineering, downsizing, they happen like one time whenever we get a new leader. Under continuous improvement, we want to maintain the integrity of the organization, but continually update, continually modify, improve our processes. Now, we've been doing this a long time in the private sector. Engineering firms know all about it. The Air Force started doing it in the 80s, maybe the late 70s, the early 80s. We're trying really, really, really hard to figure out how to do this, but there are lots of significant problems, and most of them are ego-driven. How do we set up a system where the people who are the lowest ranking can talk to some of the highest ranking people about changes, and those managers not feel threatened or not feel like they need to justify where they're in leadership? That's like a cultural change that's got to take place in organizations. So it's really difficult. But there are lots of reforms at the state and local levels where we have levels of communication that are easier to breach, where you can talk to managers, and you can talk to city manager, you can talk to department heads really quickly, and you can sort of get a feel for what they're going to accept and what they're not going to accept. You can start talking and set up this cooperation inside your agency. Now, the fundamental approaches from each of these movements are directly in conflict with each other. That's to say, you cannot mix and match these different approaches and have a lot of success. When we combine downsizing, for example, with re-engineering, deals with conflict. It comes from the inside out, downsizing from the outside in. So the downsizers say, we've got to do something immediately, we've got to make some changes. The re-engineers talk about greater efficiency and customer service. Smaller organizations have to be the result. Like, we can't, let's say, for example, combine re-engineering with continuous improvement. Re-engineering causes conflict. It causes competition. Whereas continuous improvement wants you to cooperate and work together and check your ego. And you can't sort of like establish a policy of re-engineering and continuous improvement at the same time, because if you're fighting for stuff, you want to take credit for it under re-engineering. But if you're cooperating, cooperation requires that somebody not take credit for everything. So you can't mix and match these ideas and have a lot of success. Usually they work best when they're used in isolation. And the biggest problem is that the approach that works best is not known. That's to say, some of them have strengths and weaknesses, and they may fit in certain circumstances and not in others. It's just what we do. We are constantly in the process of re-engineering, reworking, trying to cooperate and continuously improve. It's not just in the United States. There are all sorts of changes that are taking place in order to deliver government services better. There's no single set of ideas that drives all of these changes globally. And in the last couple of decades in particular, we've pushed customer service. We've talked about satisfaction. We've talked about cooperation. But that'll change in the next little bit. And we'll come through an economic recession and we'll end up with more downsizing policies and trying to figure out how those will work. The people who have mixed and matched ideas have had really bad success, but they continually try to do that. We've made some big effects in America and in other nations, but this problem is not going to go away. We're going to continually try and strive to fix and update and be better. Now, the way in which management play a role is crucial. That's to say, if management wants to make reforms and they stick to it, those reforms will stick. But if managers sort of are flighty, they don't stick to a constant strategy, those reforms won't take place. And those managers often feel pressure from politics. So whatever is politically important at the time often drives what managers do. So if politics are all over the place in terms of what's going to work, what's not going to work, what we should be doing, managers are going to be inconsistent and reform is going to be slow. And sometimes as we do reforms, we've created newer and bigger problems trying to solve some of the old problems. So we're constantly in this process of going through competition, cooperation, downsizing, some new leader. All these times we're trying to fix things, but that's sort of to be expected inside the public sector because we have this constant push to make our organizations better.